As of 2016, Nick had gone to rehab 18 times, and that means that in 7 years, he went to rehab 18 times.
Rob Reiner's close circle has finally spoken on why his son reached a breaking point. But before that truth lands, you need to understand the world that shaped one of Hollywood's most intense legends first. Robert De Niro was born Robert Anthony De Niro on August 17, 1943, right in Manhattan, New York City. And art wasn't something he discovered later. It surrounded him from day one. His parents, Virginia Admiral and Robert De Niro Sr., weren't hobbyists or weekend creatives. They were serious painters deeply rooted in New York's art scene. That meant young Robert grew up watching discipline, obsession, sacrifice, and emotional struggle play out daily in real life, not just on canvas. Even after his parents split while he was still young, the atmosphere never softened. The home stayed bohemian, intellectually sharp, and emotionally demanding. That environment carved his worldview early and trained his eye to notice tension, silence, and inner conflict long before he ever stepped on a set. Growing up in Manhattan's Little Italy only sharpened that edge. De Niro absorbed the raw street rhythm, the body language, the side-eye glances, the coded conversations, the realism that couldn't be faked. Years later, those exact mannerisms would explode onto the screen with frightening authenticity. By his teenage years, De Niro wasn't experimenting, he was locked in. Acting wasn't a phase, it was the mission. He enrolled in elite acting programs across New York and treated training like survival, not curiosity.
Sources say Nick continued approaching guests in a similar manner and was eventually asked to leave the party.
He studied under Stella Adler, who drilled emotional truth and psychological depth into her students. This wasn't about memorizing lines. It was about understanding why a character breathes the way they do. Later, De Niro trained with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, where method acting became a full-contact mental discipline. Those years created the De Niro formula the world would come to fear and admire. Total immersion, extreme preparation, zero shortcuts. If he played it, he lived it, period. His early film roles in the late 1960s and early 1970s were small, but the warning signs were there. You could feel the intensity simmering under the surface. Directors noticed. Hollywood took notes. Then came the partnership that rewired cinema itself. When De Niro teamed up with Martin Scorsese for Mean Streets in 1973, everything changed. The film was gritty, semi-autobiographical, and dangerously real. De Niro's performance didn't feel acted. It felt volatile, unpredictable, alive. That role announced a new kind of actor, one who could channel real human instability without polishing the edges. His rise only accelerated with The Godfather Part II in 1974. Playing young Vito Corleone, a role already legendary, was a high-risk move. De Niro barely spoke English on screen, relying on silence, posture, and micro-expressions. The result was surgical, controlled, powerful. That performance earned him his first Academy Award and confirmed he wasn't just talented, he was dangerous in the best way.
It's an extraordinary financial expense. It may make life easier in some ways, but it doesn't necessarily make life better. So when you think about a family here who was trying everything over the course of a decade plus, I mean, you're putting a lot of effort into dealing with this relationship, and for it to end so tragically and violently is very upsetting.
But what truly separated De Niro from everyone else was his obsession with authenticity. He didn't pretend to become characters. He dissolved into them. For Taxi Driver in 1976, he didn't research from a distance. He got a real taxi license and drove New York streets for months. The loneliness, the anger, the quiet madness, all of it soaked in. That infamous "you talking to me" moment wasn't scripted. It was raw instinct caught on film. It became a cultural scar. By the time Raging Bull arrived in 1980, the dedication hit near-myth status. To play Jake LaMotta, De Niro trained as a real boxer, then gained over 60 pounds to show the character's collapse. The transformation was brutal, physical, emotional, uncomfortable, and unforgettable. That role earned him his second Academy Award and locked his legacy as an actor who sacrificed everything for truth. Throughout the 80s and 90s, De Niro stacked classic after classic. The king of comedy, Once Upon a Time in America, Brazil, Goodfellas, Cape Fear, Casino, each role revealed a new layer. In Goodfellas, his Jimmy Conway wasn't loud, he was quiet and calculating, proof that real danger doesn't need to shout. Then came the twist no one expected. In the late 90s and early 2000s, De Niro leaned into comedy and crushed that too. He proved intensity didn't limit him, it powered everything. Movies like Analyze This, Meet the Parents, and The Intern flipped the script on everything people thought they knew about Robert De Niro. Instead of brooding silence and menace, audiences saw timing, self-awareness, and sharp humor. It proved something important. Only an actor with real authority can clown his own legend and still come out untouchable. These roles weren't accidents or cash grabs. They showed confidence at the highest level. De Niro knew exactly who he was on screen, and he wasn't scared to poke fun at that image. That kind of move only works when your resume is bulletproof. But De Niro's impact didn't stop when the cameras cut. Outside of acting, he became a serious force as a producer, director, and cultural power player. After the September 11th attacks, he co-founded the Tribeca Film Festival to help revive Lower Manhattan. This wasn't branding, it was commitment. Tribeca became a lifeline for the neighborhood and a launchpad for independent filmmakers. Through it, De Niro backed new voices, fresh stories, and risky ideas, making sure cinema didn't turn stale or safe. Behind the camera, his directing style stayed personal and grounded. A Bronx Tale in 1993 wasn't flashy, it was honest. The story pulled directly from his own upbringing and explored loyalty, temptation, and the quiet choices that change lives forever. That film revealed De Niro's deep respect for character work and moral tension, themes that had always followed him. He wasn't chasing spectacle, he was chasing truth. Even as the years stacked up, De Niro never faded into the background. Performances in Silver Linings Playbook, The Irishman, and Killers of the Flower Moon showed an artist willing to face aging, regret, and history head-on. The Irishman hit especially hard. Using digital de-aging, De Niro returned to the criminal world that defined much of his early career. But this time, there was no swagger, just reflection, loss, and the heavy cost of a life built on moral shortcuts. Off-screen, De Niro's personal life unfolded in chapters just as layered as his films. Each phase reflected reinvention, responsibility, and a deep sense of loyalty to family. In 1976, he married actress and singer Diane Abbott during the most explosive rise of his career. Fame was accelerating fast, pressure was constant, and the spotlight never shut off. During that time, they welcomed their son, Raphael De Niro. Unlike his father, Raphael chose real estate over acting, carving out his own lane while staying loosely connected to the film world. De Niro's sense of family went even deeper when he adopted Abbott's daughter, Drina De Niro. That decision wasn't symbolic, it was permanent. It showed his willingness to step up beyond biology. Drina later explored acting, modeling, and filmmaking, often crediting De Niro as a steady presence and protector in her life. That bond stayed strong even when the marriage didn't. In 1988, De Niro and Abbott separated, closing one chapter but not abandoning responsibility. He stayed involved, supportive, and present for his children despite the split. By the mid-1990s, his personal life shifted again through his relationship with actress and model Toukie Smith. In 1995, they welcomed twin sons, Julian and Aaron De Niro, through surrogacy. The twins represented a new phase of fatherhood later in life. De Niro stayed private about their upbringing, determined to keep them grounded despite his global fame. In 1997, De Niro married Grace Hightower, a philanthropist and former flight attendant. Their relationship was built on shared values, ambition, and family focus. In 1998, they welcomed their son, Elliot De Niro. Later, De Niro publicly spoke about Elliot's autism, using his platform to raise awareness and push understanding forward. Although De Niro and Hightower separated later that same year, their story didn't end there. In a rare move, they reconciled and renewed their vows in 2004. That decision reflected something deeply personal about De Niro, a belief in second chances, emotional endurance, and rebuilding even after fractures. Their family expanded once again in 2011 with the birth of their daughter, Helen Grace De Niro, born via surrogate. Becoming a father again in his late 60s didn't slow De Niro down. It sharpened him. He embraced the role with the same seriousness that defined every chapter of his parenting journey. He's spoken often about how fatherhood kept reshaping him over time. It brought perspective. It forced humility. And it gave him purpose far beyond awards, acclaim, or legacy on screen. Taken together, these chapters paint a picture of a man whose private life was just as layered as his public image. Through marriages, separations, reconciliations, and the evolving challenge of raising children across decades, De Niro consistently showed that family, however complex or unconventional, remained at the core of who he was. Then came the silence that shook Hollywood. After the horrific discovery at Rob Reiner's Brentwood home, shock spread far beyond Los Angeles. Friends and longtime collaborators struggled to reconcile the gentle, affable man they knew with the brutal reality now attached to his name. Among those most deeply affected was Robert De Niro, a close friend of Reiners for decades. When he finally spoke, he did so with rare emotional openness, hinting at what he believed had been quietly unraveling behind closed doors. This wasn't something that came out of nowhere, De Niro said softly, his voice heavy with restraint. When something like this happens, people want a single moment, a single trigger. That's not how these things work. They build, they fracture, they erode. The events of December 14, 2025 shattered a family and stunned the industry. Nothing about it felt sudden to those who had sensed long simmering strain. When Roy Reiner arrived at the Brentwood home after being alerted that her parents had missed a routine massage appointment, she expected confusion, not catastrophe. What she encountered instead would follow her for the rest of her life. She discovered her father's body and fled the home in terror before later learning of her mother's fate. In a single moment, Roy became an unwilling witness to the devastating consequences of years of unresolved tension. De Niro spoke about the unbearable weight of such a discovery. "That's something no child should ever have to see," he said. "That image doesn't leave you. It becomes part of you whether you want it or not." As investigators began piecing together the timeline, attention turned to Nick Reiner, who had been living with his parents. Friends later recalled that Nick had appeared increasingly volatile in the months leading up to the tragedy. De Niro was careful not to excuse what followed, but he spoke honestly about what he believed had gone ignored for too long. "There was pain there," he said, "deep pain. And when pain goes untreated, when it's dismissed or minimized, it doesn't disappear. It turns inward or outward." One moment that would later haunt those involved was a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien the night before the killings. Witnesses described Nick as agitated, disruptive, and visibly unmoored. When Rob Reiner confronted his son about his behavior, the argument that followed was loud enough to draw attention and tense enough to unsettle the room, including De Niro, who watched it unfold with growing concern. That moment symbolized something far bigger than a father correcting a son. De Niro said it plainly. That wasn't discipline. That was years of bottled frustration colliding in public. And once pressure like that explodes into the open, there's no sealing it back up. After Roy contacted authorities, her next call spoke volumes about how tight Reiner's inner circle truly was. She reached out to Billy Crystal, and his response was immediate. He rushed to the house with his wife without hesitation. That urgency said everything. Reiner wasn't just respected, he was deeply loved. De Niro later described Crystal's reaction as pure heartbreak. "We all felt like we failed him somehow," De Niro admitted. "You look back and you think, what did we miss? What signs did we explain away? And why?" he added quietly. "Because it was easier than confronting them." Nick's arrest later that day marked the legal beginning of a tragedy that had been building emotionally for years. De Niro chose his words carefully, refusing to sensationalize the violence or turn it into spectacle. "This isn't a story about fame or Hollywood," he said. "It's about a family. It's about mental health. It's about what happens when love and fear exist in the same space for too long." In the days that followed, De Niro pushed for compassion, but not denial. Understanding, not excuses. "You can mourn the victims and still ask how things got this far," he said. "If we don't ask that question, then we're just waiting for the next time it happens." For De Niro, losing Rob Reiner wasn't just losing a friend. It was a brutal reminder that even lives filled with laughter, success, and connection can hide unbearable strain. "We tell ourselves that strong people will ask for help," he said quietly. "Sometimes they don't, and sometimes by the time they do, it's already too late." Now that you know the full story, what part of this tragedy stayed with you the most? Do you think the warning signs were there all along, or was this truly unavoidable? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more untold stories, and we'll see you on the next one.